This presentation covers the last part of Chapter 3 on generating search terms for research. That's Chapter 3 of the Amy Sloan book, Researching the Law, Finding What You Need When You Need It. This presentation is intended to help students develop a list of search terms for our issue. And the issue is, did the neighbor commit the tort of battery by purposely blowing smoke in the client's face? There are different methods of determining different techniques used to develop search terms. We're going to talk about 3 of them. One is called TAPP. It's the acronym TAPP, which stands for things, acts, person, or place. The other one is TARP, which stands for things, cause of action, relief, and parties. And the third one comes from our textbook, and I'm calling it the Sloan Search Terms Chart method. These techniques have been developed to help you think of words to look for when you're doing your research. I've deliberated on the topic of what technique I should emphasize in this course, and I finally decided that you should utilize the method you're most comfortable with. I'm a little bit worried that the Sloan Search Terms Chart may be somewhat harder for some students than it is for others. I don't know. As such, though, I'm going to give you the choice, and at the end of this presentation you'll hear about I'm going to tell you about the assignment for this module. I'm going to give you the choice of choosing a search term method from these 3 techniques, which I'm going to explain a little bit in this presentation. The function of each of these techniques is to provide you with some suggestions of words you could use in your search within the online research environment, such as databases, Westlaw Next, and other online services. So first we're going to look at the TAPP method, the things, acts, person, or place method, TAPP. Okay, the TAPP and TARP methods. These are described really well in Chapter 14 of your textbook that you're using in PLA 1104. That's the textbook titled Introduction to Paralegal Studies, A Critical Thinking Approach by Catherine Currier and Thomas Eimerman. As stated in that textbook, the function of these acronyms is to simply suggest words that you could look for in an index or within the online full text of a statute or court opinion, or a secondary source, which we'll begin working with as we progress through this or the next module. Once you have thought and written down words that fit these categories, and by categories I'm referring to thing is a category, acts is a category, person is a category, place is a category. If you use the TARP method, thing is a category, cause of action is a category, relief is a category, and parties is a category. Once you have thought and written those down, you then have to enlarge your search possibilities by thinking of synonyms, antonyms, broader words, and narrower words. On page 436, in fact, of the book Introduction to Paralegal Studies, A Critical Thinking Approach, and I'm looking at the 4th edition, there is an example provided of how we expand searches for a case involving a possible malpractice by a pediatrician. In addition, in that 4th edition of Introduction to Paralegal, the authors note that if you begin your research with too many rather than too few search terms, you will be much better off than if you go in there with too few. And what they don't mention, though, in their book that I'll be expanding on in the next slides is how you can go about expanding your search terms. In fact, I read the page and I don't see anything about thesaurus or legal encyclopedia or legal dictionary. However, maybe it's there, but I didn't see it when I took a glance at it a few minutes ago. The point is that the next slides will help in using the textbook for this course which is Research the Law, Finding What You Need When You Need It by Amy Sloan, she incorporates some good techniques on how to expand the research terms. And so I find that all three of these methods work the same way, and you're going to illustrate using one of the three methods, and that the instructions for that will follow at the very end of this presentation. The Sloan search term chart is in the Sloan Researching the Law, Finding What You Need When You Need It book. And again, this is just a third method of generating search terms. TAPP is a method of generating search terms, TARP is a method of generating search terms, and Sloan's search term chart is a method of generating search terms. But Sloan asserts that there are some advantages from the comprehensive list of search terms, which I think are important or good to note at this point. Sloan, in addition to Currier and Eimerman's advice on expanding your search, Sloan adds that the rationale is often that the resources you research, like online databases or books or whatever you are researching in, they'll use different terms for the same thing. So clearly, as with any method of developing a search term list, a comprehensive list will ensure you find what you need. So Sloan, instead of using the categories of TAPP or TARP, she describes the categories a little bit differently. And if you look at, on page of chapter 3, she has a nice little chart on page 32 of chapter 30, no, not page 32, apologize there. Sorry here. Take me just a second to find that again. It's on page 26, I believe. Yes, page 26. Page 26, she calls that figure 3.3 a search terms chart. And if you take a minute now to open up the book to that page, she has different categories. She has parties involved, places and things, potential claims and defenses, relief sought by the complaining or injured party, and additional categories. Do you see that in the left-hand column? The TAPP and TARP would be, the first category would be thing, if you were working with TAPP or TARP. The second category, instead of places and things, if you decided to use one of the TAPP or TARP methods, would be the cause of action, depending on what method you have decided to use. So in other words, this type of chart is very useful for any of the three methods of generating search terms. So her categories are a little bit different and cover the legal theories, the conduct of and mental states of the parties, the injury suffered, the people involved, and the places and things. Just as listed on this slide, they're listed pretty much the same way on her search term chart. Okay? So the objective is to understand that the same chart can be used. You just change the first column to the categories according to the method you use, TAPP, TARP, or Sloan. So what is really great about Sloan's description of her chart is that she explains that increasing the breadth and depth of your research terms is a useful tool, and a legal thesaurus is a great tool for for increasing the breadth. You can find synonyms and related terms. A legal dictionary is an excellent tool for increasing the depth, because you can work with finding search terms that vary the level of abstraction. The reason these increased terms are, increasing the breadth and depth is important is because some search engines look precisely for the same terms you specify. There is no built-in thesaurus in some search engines online. So as such, your research could be more successful if you use more terms that are synonymous or related. Sloan gives an example with the terms patio, porch, and yard. And that's in Chapter 3 as well. One of the last pages of Chapter 3. In fact, it's page 25. Note that these three terms, patio, porch, and yard, can all mean the same thing. One legal practitioner or a judge may write about the law in a commentary or in a case and use any one of these three terms. They all have the same meaning, and a legal thesaurus can help you with the task of increasing the breadth of your research terms. Secondly, abstractly conceptualizing your initial search terms is also beneficial. In addition to the problem of the precise nature of the use of terms, it's also essential to define the problem abstractly. Legal writings, for example, statutes, are often ambiguous for a reason. In fact, Currier and Eimerman's book in Chapter 3 of the, and that's the Introduction to Paralegal Studies, a Critical Thinking Approach, as noted in Chapter 3 of that book, the formulation of legislation is intended to apply to broad categories of people and situations rather than to specific individuals most of the time. On the same token, if you're searching for case law that is analogous, similar to, on point, remember that term, to your factual situation, increasing the breadth and depth of the search by more abstract concepts will help to overcome a problem similar to what I mentioned with the vague or ambiguous statutory language. The court, having interpreted a statute or common law principle using some different terms from those of your case scenario, if you don't use more abstract terms, you may not ever find what you're looking for. So as noted in a previous lecture, we're looking for analogous on-point cases in our efforts to research for case law. So we can ask the court to apply or not apply the same principles, which is stare decisis or precedent. So the main idea here of breadth and depth and increasing those will help you to find more, and then in the next chapter we'll learn that you find more and you filter out what you need from the larger results. Okay? And it all is based on the way the law works, and that legislation is ambiguous, and that that legislatures and courts use different terms for the same or nearly the same thing. And if we don't increase the breadth and depth of our search terms, we're going to miss stuff. Next, I want to go over an example. So I chose the legal question or issue having to do with the legal doctrine of trespass to demonstrate or illustrate an example of the search term generation process. Now again, I have used the Sloan process or the Sloan categories. That's all I've done. The process is the same. The categories are the only thing that change. Remember, categories here. These are the categories. Just remember, like I said, that's really important. The process is the same, but the format or method of conceptualizing the process you choose from to use for your assignment is going to be different. All right, so this is an illustration of the first two columns of a chart that would be used for Sloan's method, and having to do with the legal question, did the neighbor trespass on the client's land by leaning over the porch railing? The category of parties involved and its initial search terms could be, this is sitting here by yourself maybe, or without any kind of tool at all, like a legal thesaurus or a legal dictionary. In fact, these initial search terms come mostly from the case scenario.
And places and things is a category under the Sloan method. And of course, we want to use the initial search terms that describe, this is a Florida case. It was on a duplex, on a porch with railing. The potential claims and defenses: trespass to land, leaning over the wall, and the relief sought by the client, of course, is damages. And it's pretty much says these very points in the case scenario itself. So the first step is to look at the case scenario and see what it says, and make the determination of what is readily available to you, and right there off the top of your head, and place those into the column of your initial search terms. Next, we'll expand the list and go into how we increase the breadth. Again, using the legal doctrine of trespass and the same legal issue statement or legal research question: did the neighbor trespass on the client's land, blah, blah, blah. We just expanded now. I just expanded the list and added a third column here. This third column is the increased breadth column. Remember, using a legal thesaurus is a great tool for increasing the breadth of your search terms. And again, I'm advocating that no matter which of the three methods, TAPP, TARP, or Sloan, that you use, this practice is essentially the same, using the same tools. You simply change the categories over here based on what you decide is your favorite, the method you want to choose from. So you can see, using a thesaurus and looking up the word neighbors, one might find homeowners, renters, tenants, or lessees. Or neighboring landowners. You might find these same words in the thesaurus. If you take the initial term Florida, you're not going to find much in the thesaurus on that. Well, it might say state. I don't know if it's in there. But if you looked up the term duplex, you might find more breadth in the thesaurus with some synonyms from the thesaurus. Porch, patio, stoop, railing, a fence, or a wall. So the point here is that for every one of the initial search terms, if you look those up in a legal thesaurus, you're very likely to find some words with increased breadth to help to add to your list of search terms. Next, we're going to look at how to at an example of the same case where we increase the depth. This is what it looks like when we increase the depth of the legal search terms. Again, we're on the topic of trespass. Did the neighbor trespass? Blah, blah, blah. We have the same form. We already had these three columns right here. And now we're just going to look to a legal dictionary. And the legal dictionary phase, sometimes you're looking at both columns a little bit. So look at your legal dictionary and expand the depth, or change your search terms, add to your search terms based on what the legal dictionary is telling you. These kinds of words that you found here, you might find other words here. You might find some words in the legal dictionary and or the legal thesaurus that just don't apply at all. You may just want to disregard some of the nonsense things you run across. Of course, common sense still prevails in this whole thing. And again, if you choose to use TAPP or TARP, you would change your categories here. Also notice that this last cell down here has nothing. It's very possible that the words you find in your initial or your increased breadth, or whatever the case, you might have a blank space because you don't have other terms, or the terms you find are nonsense and you're not going to even think about it or include them in your search term list. So that's an important point to make when you're working on your assignment for this project or for this module, to make sure that you don't get too wrapped up in having to fill up every single spot in the chart. It's very possible that you can't. All right, so on the next slide, I'm going to tell you about your assignment. I've written out the assignment instructions here. What you're going to do is use the predefined TORP battery issue / research question, and you're going to choose one of the three methods, TAPP, TARP, or the Sloan chart of generating search terms. And we're going to make sure that you use this particular issue statement or research question. Did the neighbor commit the tort of battery by purposely blowing smoke in the client's face? Do not do the contract. Do not do the trespass contract, or I can't remember, all of a sudden it's gone. But this is the one on the tort of battery. After choosing your method, you're going to create a chart like the one on the previous slide with the 4 columns. And the first row, the top columns, will look just like the one from the previous chart. It'll look just like this: categories, of course, initial terms, increased breadth, increased depth. In the rows below, for each category, so for each category, label the categories based on the method you've chosen. So if you are going to use the TAPP method, your first category item is going to be thing. And then the next one would be acts, and then below that would be persons and places. And so if you're using the TARP, you would put those categories in the column below, in the rows below. Then you're going to go over here and you're going to do initial search terms. And you're going to use the case scenario and maybe some things that just come off of the top of your head in the initial search terms column. And you're going to list them for each category, making sure that you align the search terms with the category you've chosen. And then you're going to increase the breadth by looking in a legal thesaurus and list those that come along that are additional terms that you think are valuable to the research in the increased breadth. And next you're going to go into the increased depth column, listing again below that column title the words that you find in your search through a legal dictionary. All right. Here's one more important thing about this assignment. First of all, do not spend a lot of time on this assignment. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do a thorough and careful job, but it's important to not get too involved in wasting time on search terms, because this should be a process that simply you write down your search terms that are obvious in the initial search terms column. You go to a legal thesaurus and you find more terms, and you go to a legal dictionary and you find other terms. And it's something that you should be able to do in no more than 2 hours, okay? I also ask that you record the time you began. So when you start the assignment and you're ready to start your search term chart and build the chart on it, you can use Excel or Microsoft Word, a table in Microsoft Word, or an Excel spreadsheet, whatever you want to use. And write down the time that you start doing the research terms, when you start writing down the terms. And when you finish, record the amount of time you spent on the assignment, and put that amount of time at the top of your spreadsheet or your table, whatever you do. And this is the purpose of asking you to do that in doing your assignment, is to help you recognize the time it takes to do research, mostly because this type of work is billable to the client. And that means that the attorney you work for is going to turn around and possibly send a bill to the client that has hired him or her, and you need to kind of start to recognize the time it takes and just understand the cost of legal research, and that spinning your wheels and not staying focused on the research itself, and just this is such a procedural thing that you should work through it quickly. And so that's it as far as the assignment. You can read this again and just make sure that you understand that we're using the tort of battery case issue question, where you're building a chart and you're going to name the categories according to the method TAPP, TARP, or Sloan, and you're going to, for each category, develop search or write search terms that you found from the case scenario, and then increase the breadth and increase the depth as we've discussed in here. Then before you begin the assignment, be sure you write down what time you started, so that you can write down, so that you can, when you stop, you know how long it took for you to get this project done. And then at the top of your spreadsheet or your table in Word, depending on which method you choose to put this in writing to me, tell me how much time you spent on it. Just don't spend more than 2 hours on it. All right? And don't forget, there may be some cells or columns, I should say, some spaces that you don't find additional terms for. And most of the time that's okay. All right? The next slide is the conclusion. The conclusion, we're identifying the search terms using the TAPP, TARP, or the Sloan method. So the next slide will have some references for you to refer to in terms of what I referred to in getting this presentation put together. And these are the references. If you have any questions about the assignment, just send me a course mail message and go to the inbox in Canvas. And thank you.